Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm Peter Lavelle. I'm joined by Ron Placone. He's in Los Angeles. Thanks for getting up really early. And, Ron, for the last couple of weeks, I've really wanted to ask you something that I've been thinking about very deeply because I keep hearing it on Fox News and Republicans. Is it really true that Joe Biden's a socialist? That's what I.
Oh, Peter.
I
You and
about this at night.
you and I have some political differences, so I'll give you an answer you'll love. I wish that were true. I wish that were true that Joe Biden is a socialist. He is very, very, very far from a socialist. He is nowhere close in any definition of the word. He is very much a capitalist in most of the world, even in the United States to an extent. He would be considered right wing, and yeah, he is not a socialist. He is far from it. I wish all those Donald Trump commercials were true. I really do.
Well, I mean, why do you think they're doing it? Do they think because growing up in America, a child of the Cold War, I've heard this all my life here, okay? But something is, I mean, the Cold War has been over for a quarter a century now, okay? And it doesn't resonate with people. Saying it's going to be like Venezuela doesn't resonate with people because most Americans don't know where Venezuela is, okay? But what I think is almost to the point of comical is that you have millennials and the Zoomers. Well, they like socialism. They want
Right.
socialism. I mean, why are they doing this here? I see we have George here with us as well. Go ahead, Ron. I mean, isn't it really kind of counterintuitive that you'd think that this actually is appealing to some people? Go ahead.
Well, I think right now in the United States contemporarily, they're going after all these supposed Republicans who are going to go for Biden. And I think that's what the Joe Biden campaign is really going after. And I think the Trump campaign is sort of responding to that. When in reality, I mean, there was a poll that came out recently that said only 5% of Republicans are considering voting for Joe Biden. So there's this very odd marketing going on in our 2020 election where there's these Republicans that may or may not even exist that may go for Joe Biden, and the Trump campaign doesn't want to lose them, and the Joe Biden campaign is really, really going after them. And you'll hear the Trump campaign saying, Joe Biden's this crazy socialist. He's a socialist. He reads Marx. And I have a feeling the only Marx that Joe Biden's familiar with is Groucho. I could be wrong, but that's a guess. And, and then you have the Trump campaign, or excuse me, the Biden campaign, where Joe Biden's like, I'm not going to cancel fracking. Don't worry. I'm not going to end fracking. Nothing will change Wall Street. And I don't know who they're going after, but my guess would be nobody. I think this is appealing to nobody.
Could I just jump in here? What's very strange is that Biden has provided Trump with a golden opportunity to attack him on his foreign policy interventionism, because Biden, without question, is promising an interventionist policy. The people that he is surrounded with and who have spoken explicitly about interventionism. So this Antony Blinken, his chief foreign policy advisor, has explicitly said in interviews that he intends to relaunch the war in Syria. He's got Michelle Flournoy, who's obviously designated for the Pentagon. She's as hawkish as they come. This would be an opportunity. I mean, so forget all the stuff about socialism, Venezuela, and whatever. He could do to Biden what he did quite successfully to Hillary Clinton, attack her as the hawk and pose as the dove. I mean, why do you think Trump isn't taking this opportunity?
Are you asking me? Or
That's you, yeah.
Oh, okay. I think he might be trying to, actually, because, I mean, recently he's talked about trying to withdraw troops again. Now, it's one of those things, I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, he has spoken in the past about withdrawing troops, which, I am no fan of Trump at all, but I would like to see that happen, regardless of who does it. There have been times in the past where we got our hopes up and then it ended up not happening. So, I proceed with caution when I hear a lot of these things, especially from the Trump administration, that, Trump will make claims on Twitter and what have you. And then it turns out that that's not true. He can't actually do the things he's saying he's doing, et cetera. So I think he might be, from a messaging standpoint, trying to do that because, yeah, Biden's hawkishness is definitely a huge concern. I mean, this is a guy who voted for the Iraq war, who's, definitely not a peace candidate by any means. And once again, in the contemporary United States, we don't really have peace as an option.
Yeah, it's true. Ron, going back to the socialism issue, and the more I think about it and look at Joe Biden and look how the political spectrum has changed in the time that he's been in politics, which is essentially a half century, he's basically a liberal Republican in a sense. I think he is, okay? And
then you're right.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that and I want to address this to George too, is that this whole approach of trying to define Joe Biden, it's failing because they're not focusing on the simplest things. Okay, saying he's a socialist just lands flat. Okay, it doesn't really mean anything to anyone anymore. Okay, and if it does mean something, it means something very specific among progressives, and I understand that, and that's why I wouldn't paint you or Bernie or anyone else like that as a socialist in that pejorative way of the Cold War. No, I would say that they're basically backing majority ideas. Okay, that's not socialism here. Okay. So, I mean, is George and Ron, is he basically a liberal Republican that the Democrats have thrown up as an avatar to get across the line? You first, George, go ahead.
I agree with you, Peter. That's exactly who he is. He's pro-business, pro-hawkishness, foreign policy, interventionism. Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is a guy who has never seen a bombing that he hasn't supported, and given the Democrats' proclivity, their extreme views on Russia, you know what you're getting from him. And there's really very little secret of it. That was, George Will just wrote a column the other day, very, very excited about the prospects of a Biden presidency. It'll be, quote, "America is back," unquote, which is the sort of the nightmare slogan for the rest of the world. That's who Biden is. And I would have thought it'd be fairly easy to paint him for what he is. But the Trump campaign's having real difficulties with this.
Ron, why is both parties abandon the working class?
Well, because both parties have the same owners, and those owners are Wall Street, the donor class, and corporate interest, and that's who they answer to. That's why Joe Biden will say to Wall Street, hey, nothing will fundamentally change. And, getting to, what we're talking about as far as the 2020 election is concerned, I have said this. I do not think this is a competition between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I genuinely think this is a competition between Donald Trump and himself. And I think that it is, if Donald Trump manages to just mishandle things so badly that he beats himself, that's the only way Joe Biden becomes president. And I am not a fan of either candidate at all. I just think it is beyond sad that this is where our electoral politics are. And this is by design. This is what the donor class wants. Bernie Sanders had an entire movement behind him, still does, but they had to kneecap him twice.
What do you think about that, George? Because that's what Ron just said is kind of an echo that I've been saying for the entire campaign too, is that it's really all about Trump. It has nothing to do with Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a footnote in this election completely. Okay, I mean he's just been put into place. Okay, it could have been almost anyone. Okay, and we'd really be in the same situation right now. Actually, no. I mean, if you had someone that was actually articulate, okay. And would pretend more to reach out to progressives instead of just being silent. But reflect upon what Ron had to say. Trump against Trump. I think it rings well with me.
I think so. I think that this is an election which, in theory, Trump should be able to win fairly comfortably. The issues that we're talking about the virus, the economic slowdown, China as the origin of the virus, they should play to Trump's strengths. I mean, he's the one who wants to get the economy open. He's the one who's been warning about China, the threat from China. He's the one who's been warning about the offshoring and the deindustrialization of the United States, so that the supply chains are now outside of the United States. So all of these issues should be, and again, immigration, which is also a public health issue. So they should, in theory, be working for him and against Biden. But it's not working, and I think it is a problem that Trump isn't able to get a coherent and clear message across. You watch his interviews, and he just meanders pointlessly. 1 minute he's saying that he's the non-interventionist and he's the one who's bringing peace. The next minute he's boasting that he's been tougher on Russia than any other president, or that he's done all this with Iran and he's really chastened Iran and he's going to keep up his belligerent policy towards Iran. It's an incoherent message, and I think that's why he's failing.
Ron, it seems to me that any candidate, and we can just kind of walk away from the artificial competition, Republican, Democrat, but, if you had a candidate or a party or a movement that just said to the middle class, we promise to keep you whole. And I think they would win, because there are people now, they don't know where their next paycheck is going to be. Maybe they're not making rent, and they're at home trying to school their children where the American educational system hasn't made the parents very well educated, and now you're passing down the same nonsense to your children. I mean, my point is, if you were just to reach out and say, we will keep you whole, because nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying we will keep you whole. Okay, finish up for us, Ron. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. If they had an emergency UBI for people between now and the election day, Trump would just be guaranteed re-election. That's just like objectively true.
As a conservative, I've been saying that for months.
And yet it doesn't happen. And I think there's a number of reasons for this.